Be friends.
Baylor in West Virginia tomorrow, McLean Stadium, 11 o'clock kick. Our pregame at 9 o'clock from the studio, state-of-the-art studio on Elm Avenue and MLK, just right down the street from McLean Stadium. Grayson Grundhoefer, Sikkim365.com recruiting analyst. Also, Bearcast with Craig. It's out every Tuesday, lengthy with everything you can imagine. So, Grayson, I saw your list of visitors. There are a bunch. There's a couple of three from 2022, some of the commits as well, a lot from 2023. Anyone in particular, a list or two or three in particular that you think are the most important?
Yeah, I mean, this weekend really wasn't supposed to be too big of a group, I would say. I think they're more focusing on homecoming next weekend, should be a little bit bigger of a list. And then, of course, when you get into like the Texas game and the Oklahoma game, I think you'll start to see more visitors, kind of more similar to the Iowa State game. But, you know, this weekend you have a few commits that are coming, which is nice to see. But I think kind of the main overall theme of this group is there's a lot of evaluation guys that are going to be on campus, guys without offers, who the Baylor staff is kind of evaluating and seeing, hey, could this guy fit in well with the 2022 class? Or 2023 class, to be honest. So there's a lot of guys like that. But I think the main one that I want to highlight probably, there's probably two. But the first one is North Crowley linebacker, Smaji Burrell. And the reason I bring him up is because he's actually the most recent Baylor offer in any of the classes. That was last week. So obviously quick transition from getting the offer to getting him on campus, which is very nice to see. They were his first offer. So a chance to really get out to a nice early lead with Smaje. And then, of course, with out of Maid Creek, you also have the cornerback, Tayshawn Wilson. And Tayshawn's a guy who I think, you know, they offered during camp season, became his first offer, Power 5 offer, that is. I think Louisiana Tech beat Baylor to the punch, but for Power 5, it was Baylor. And so I think they're out to a nice lead. They stayed in constant contact. I know he posted a few graphics on Twitter, so he's another one to keep an eye on. But those two are probably the ones that I definitely need to highlight. But outside of that, it's a lot of evaluation prospects.
Grayson, since the 4-1 start, Dave Aranda was recruiting pretty well anyway, in spite of last year's debacle at 2-7. But have you seen an uptick on the interest in Baylor because of the way they've started?
That's kind of hard to say. I would probably say the guys that they offered, have definitely taken notice. So, guys who came to the Iowa State game, that was obviously a bit of movement there, I would say, where you get to see kind of what this Baylor team is striving towards. And I would say, I think it was kind of the perfect game, because if you watch the first half of that game, that's who Baylor wants to be, right? So I think a lot of recruits got to see that and go, oh, okay, so this is the goal. This is where Jeff Grimes wants to take the offense. This is kind of what they have in mind with their play calling and scheming. Now, obviously, the second half didn't go great offensively, but it was kind of laying the groundwork a little bit. And then they were able to come up with a huge win, a great atmosphere. And so, yeah, I think games like that help. But overall, I think this is really about, staying relevant. So playing well throughout the year, not just through the first few games. This team needs to find a way to continue to finish strong, in the year strong. And if you're able to do that, then yeah, that does resonate with recruits, especially when you look around Texas a little bit. There's a good opportunity for Baylor here. TCU is kind of off and on so far this year. Texas A&M has been extremely disappointing this season. Texas already has a loss. I know Tech is, 4-1, which is kind of surprising, but I would say that this is a great opportunity for Baylor to really kind of move up the pedestal a little bit and kind of try to stake claim to being the best program in the state of Texas this year, which honestly, guys, is absolutely realistic.
Grayson, I don't know if quarantine and the year where everybody basically got shut down just messed with people's minds. I know there's certain fan bases that have expectations that are not always realistic, but to see some of the reaction off of just one loss, I thought was kind of surprising from some Baylor fans. Look, some people are just that way no matter what. What was your feeling coming out of that game last week? Because everybody was disappointed in the performance, and I think everybody had something to say about just the way they played. But in terms of the season and the outlook and the momentum and all of that. Where are you with this Baylor team after that loss to Oklahoma State?
Yeah, I honestly think it was just to be honest, I think it was a game they just simply weren't ready to win quite yet. Going to Stillwater, that's not something a lot of teams in Baylor history have done. It's a very tough place to play. I know the 2019 team did it. 2015 did as well, but it hasn't been very common. So I just don't think this team is quite there yet, and that's okay. Oklahoma State's a really good football team, and Baylor went in there and kind of did everything they could to make that game competitive and kind of stay close in that game. But at the end of the day, I do think the better team won, especially at home. And I also think that it's just one of those situations where I think Baylor just needs a little bit more time, a little bit more seasoning, and that's okay. That's totally okay. So for me, I think I'm coming out of that game just kind of with the mindset that, there's a lot that this team needs to work on, but this team is still very solid. I mean, they competed on the road in that game. They fought in the second half. And I think that fight is something that will translate throughout the rest of their schedule. So, while I'm discouraged that they lost and while they showed some things that continue to kind of flare up a little bit, whether it's, the offensive line play, the penalties, Gary not quite being as sharp as we saw through the first 3 games, those kind of things, I think are stuff that needs to be corrected going forward. But overall, just kind of the team in general, I think I'm looking at this team as one that's going to compete in every single game going forward. And I think that's all you can ask for as a Baylor fan. I mean, you just want an opportunity to win every game on your schedule, which I believe they will have.
You hear about one of the things Oklahoma didn't like about the 11 o'clock kicks, even though that was one of Fox's number one spots, was getting recruits to Norman, because it's not impossible, but it's not like, it's DFW is still a drive in the Norman. Not that they don't have airports in that area, in Oklahoma City area, but 11 o'clock kicks, is that because Texas is such a large state and a lot of these visitors can just drive from wherever they are? Most of them probably do. Is that the 11 o'clock kick matter, Grayson, when it comes to players, either those who have committed or those who have received offers, class 22 or whatever class we're talking about?
Yeah, it can definitely matter. I think, it makes things a little bit more difficult. Obviously, if you're an out-of-state prospect, that makes it a little bit tougher because you're probably going to have to fly in, stay the night on Friday, go to the game on Saturday. So, yeah, that makes it kind of tough. I would say for in-state visitors on an 11 o'clock game, if you're close enough, it's actually kind of works out pretty well because you can go to the game and still have time to kind of go around campus and do a little bit of different things just because there's so much more time in the day. But yeah, I mean, in general, I would say the 11 o'clock games are sometimes not the best for recruiting purposes because of the reasons that you mentioned. And also, I would say that the 11 o'clock games sometimes have probably the worst atmospheres. You have a lot of fans that maybe show up late, or, it's early. So you don't always have the same electric atmosphere as you would have at, for instance, a night game. So, yeah, I mean, that can definitely play a role in it. But, I mean, I think for Baylor purposes, as far as this game goes, I mean, it is all about what's happening on the field. And that's with every game. But I think it's just important that Baylor continues to win football games because at the end of the day, those wins are going to be far more important than, having an atmosphere in an 11 a.m. game with some recruits there.
Grayson, your thoughts on West Virginia tomorrow?
Yeah, this is going to be a really good game, I think. And it has been for the past few seasons, even when Baylor was significantly better in 2019. West Virginia really pushed them. They're very physical, much like Oklahoma State, and much like Iowa State was in the second half, which, can be troubling a little bit. They're top 12 in the nation in sacks. They have 17 already on the season. So if Baylor kind of looks more like they did against Oklahoma State versus how they've looked the rest of the year, then they're going to have some issues up front trying to deal with what West Virginia is going to bring to them as a defensive line. As far as where they're vulnerable, it's through the air, guys. This is one of, I think they're 72nd in the nation in pass defense. So there's going to be opportunities there for Gary Bohannon to take shots deep and find guys like Tyquan Thornton, Drew Estrada, hopefully RJ Sneed gets back, to his normal game script. And if that can happen, I think they could have a lot of success through the air. But I do believe this West Virginia team, much like their last two opponents, is going to try to take away the run game and stuff Baylor in the run game, and then try to get pressure on Gary Bohannon while saying, listen, we're going to bring all the pressure we can. We're going to try to get after Gary, rattle him, get after the offensive line, and force Gary to win this game on the offensive side. Now, on the defensive side, this is a West Virginia team that turns the ball over. They're a team that is not very explosive. They don't run the ball particularly well. So this should be a great matchup for the Baylor defense. And I think if there's one thing I'm looking for in this game, it's for Baylor to go from a good defense that we've seen throughout the year. I think they've been good. At times they were great against Oklahoma State, forcing the turnovers, but I think in general they've been good to very good. But I think this is a game where they really could put on a show and really elevate themselves to an elite level, have an elite level performance in this game. And I think they should. And if they can do that, they'll take a lot of pressure off Gary Bohannon in this offense. All
right. Grayson, thank you, man. Appreciate it. Grayson Grundhoefer. He breaks down recruiting constantly. Just sometimes in the premium section of SicEm365.com, there might be 8 or 9 threads going at one time about things he's talked to with recruits or who's visited or who isn't a visit. Updates on much. Oh, by the way, did you see the update? Zach Pyron, a young man from Alabama who had committed to Baylor and looked like he was going to be so-called, as we say the word, the godfather of the class of 2022, then decommitted, committed to Georgia Tech. So that was an update that I saw from the site as well. All right, when we